My name is Amelia Thompson. I am 32 years old. My family decided without asking that my older sister and her husband would move into my new home. The betrayal left me stunned, my father silent in agreement. At my housewarming party in Albuquerque, my mother stood up in front of the guests and declared it final for the family. My stomach dropped as my older sister nodded. The pain of being treated like an afterthought burned deep. I looked my mother in the eyes and said no. Little did they realize that my quiet refusal would force every hidden family secret into the open. If you've ever had your family assume your home was theirs to claim, tell me in the comments what you would have done. I really want to know I'm not alone in this. That housewarming party was supposed to be my quiet celebration after 8 long years of grinding as a financial analyst here in Albuquerque. I had scrimped and saved every bonus, every overtime hour, skipping vacations, and eating lunches at my desk just so I could finally own a little 3-bedroom adobe house in the foothills with a view of the Sandia Mountains. No more cramped apartments, no more noise from neighbors through thin walls, just me and the peace I had earned. The closing papers had felt like freedom when I signed them 3 weeks earlier. I had painted the walls soft beige, arranged my books on the built-in shelves, and even hung new curtains that let the morning light spill across the tile floors exactly the way I liked. Everything was finally mine. Then my mother stood up right there in the living room, glass of iced tea in her hand, and announced to 20 guests that my older sister and my brother-in-law would be moving in permanently. She said it so calmly, like it was already decided at some family meeting I had never been invited to. My older sister just smiled and nodded as if the whole thing was perfectly normal. My father sat on the couch, staring at his shoes, saying nothing. The room went quiet except for the faint clink of someone setting down a plate. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. I looked straight at my mother and said no. Just that one word, no explanations, no apologies. The guests shifted uncomfortably and the party ended early. The next morning the calls started. First my mother, her tone sweet at the beginning and then sharpening like a knife. Amelia, this is about family helping family. Your older sister and your brother-in-law lost their condo, and you have all that space. Don't be selfish. I listened without interrupting, then reminded her the house was in my name only. She hung up. 2 days later, my uncle James Cole called from across town. He had always been the one who loved big family speeches at holidays. You're breaking your mother's heart. You know that we all sacrifice for each other. What kind of example are you setting for your cousin Jackson? His voice carried that familiar mix of disappointment and authority that used to make me fold. This time I thanked him politely and ended the call. Something inside me had shifted the moment I said no at the party, and I wasn't sliding back. I drove to work the next Monday, still replaying every word. At the clinic where I handle the financial side of patient billing and insurance, my coworker, Harper Morgan, noticed I was quieter than usual. She asked if everything was okay, and I gave her the short version. Later that afternoon, my friend from work, Evelyn Green, pulled me into the break room. Evelyn is the kind of person who remembers details and never judges out loud. She listened while I told her about the party, then said quietly, "You need to start writing everything down, dates, what they said every call, just in case." She even offered to help me organize the notes on her laptop during lunch. Having someone at my side who believed me without question felt like the first solid ground I had felt in days. The pressure kept building in small, relentless waves. My Aunt Karen Cole sent a group text to the whole family about how proud she was of my older sister for handling hardship with grace. My cousin Jackson liked the message. Then my mother left a voicemail saying my father was worried about me living alone and that maybe I needed family close by for safety. Each message carried the same guilt-laced message: you owe us this. I saved every one. At night, I sat on my back patio, listening to the desert wind, and wondered how long I could hold the line before they wore me down the way they always had. A week later, my mother showed up at my door unannounced with a box of my older sister's things. Just a few boxes until they find something else, she said, stepping past me like the conversation was already over. I blocked the hallway and told her no again. She sighed the way she used to when I was a teenager who didn't want to share toys. You always make everything so difficult. When she left, I changed the locks that same afternoon. The locksmith was gone before sunset. I stood on the porch watching the mountains turn pink and felt a strange calm settle over me. I had protected what was mine, but I had no idea how deep the retaliation would go. The first sign came in the mail 2 weeks later, a letter from the New Mexico Department of Health and Human Services. Someone had filed a report claiming I was living in unsafe conditions and showing signs of emotional distress that might affect my ability to manage my own affairs. The letter requested a home visit. My hands shook as I read it. I called my lawyer, Ryan Bennett, the same hour. He had handled my house closing and knew me well enough to hear the exhaustion in my voice. This smells like family pressure, he said. Document everything and don't let anyone in without me present. I hung up, feeling both grateful and terrified that things had escalated so fast. That evening, Evelyn came over with takeout and her laptop. We sat at my kitchen table and built a timeline of every call, every text, every visit. She even suggested I reach out to a private investigator she had used once for a work matter. His name is Caleb Walsh. He's discreet and fast. I wrote the number down. The next morning I made the call. Caleb listened without interrupting, then asked for permission to start digging into my older sister's financial history and any transfers involving my parents. I said yes. For the first time, I felt like I was no longer just reacting. I was preparing. Caleb called back 3 days later with the first batch of information that made my blood run cold. He spoke in that calm, professional voice, but every word landed like a stone. Your older sister and your brother-in-law didn't just lose their condo to bad luck. They ran up over $80,000 in credit card debt on vacations and luxury purchases, while your mother covered the minimum payments from a joint account she still shares with your father. I sat on my kitchen floor, staring at the tile, and felt the room tilt. He kept going. There are transfers totaling nearly $45,000 in the last year alone. Looks like your mother was trying to keep them afloat without telling anyone else in the family. Your house was next on the list. Free housing meant they could stop paying rent and keep spending. I thanked him and hung up before my voice cracked. That single phone call changed everything. It wasn't just a casual request for space. It was a calculated plan my mother had been working on for months, and my father had known enough to stay silent. I called Evelyn right away. She came over that same evening with coffee and a notebook. We sat at the table again and added every new detail to the timeline. She didn't sugarcoat it. This is bigger than you thought. They're treating you like an ATM with walls. Her words stung, but they were true, and for the first time I let myself feel angry instead of just hurt. The pressure didn't slow down. 2 days later, my Uncle James showed up at my door, unannounced, carrying a casserole dish, like it was some kind of peace offering. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation and set it on the counter. Your mother is worried sick about you living out here all alone. She says your older sister could help with bills and keep an eye on things. Why are you making this so hard on everyone? His tone was that same mix of concern and command I had heard at every holiday dinner growing up. I stayed standing by the door and answered quietly but firm. Because it's my house and my decision. I'm not an extension of the family bank. He shook his head like I had disappointed him personally. You always did think you were better than the rest of us. This selfishness is going to come back on you. He left the casserole, but the words stayed behind like a weight on my chest. My Aunt Karen followed up the next morning with a group text to the whole family. She wrote that I was choosing isolation over love, and that my cousin Jackson agreed it was time for me to step up. The messages poured in. My older sister sent a private one saying she never thought I would turn my back on blood. Each ping on my phone felt like another little cut. I saved every single one. At work, Harper Morgan noticed I was checking my phone too often and pulled me aside during lunch. Whatever it is, keep records. People like that don't stop until they get what they want. Her advice echoed Evelyn's, and it helped me stay focused instead of spiraling. Then the official letter arrived. The New Mexico Department of Health and Human Services wanted a home visit. Someone had reported that I was showing signs of emotional instability and might not be managing my finances responsibly. I knew exactly who had filed it. I called my lawyer Ryan Bennett immediately. He arranged to be present for the visit and told me to stay calm and stick to facts. The social worker Scarlett Hayes arrived on a Thursday afternoon. She was polite but thorough, walking through every room asking questions about my job, my bills, and whether I felt safe living alone. I answered honestly and showed her the organized folders with all my mortgage papers and bank statements. When she asked if there was any family conflict behind the report, I told her the truth without emotion. She nodded, took notes, and left, saying the case would close quickly if everything checked out. That evening, my neighbor, Noah Rivera, knocked on my door. He had seen the official car and wanted to make sure I was okay. Noah is the quiet type who works from home fixing computers for local businesses. He handed me a plate of fresh tamales his wife had made. I don't mean to pry, but if you need someone to vouch that you're handling things just fine, I'm right next door. His simple offer of support meant more than he knew. We talked for 10 minutes on the porch, and he left saying he would keep an eye out for any more unexpected visitors. Having one person outside the family circle who believed me without needing proof felt like a small lifeline. The social worker cleared me completely within a week, no concerns. The report was unfounded. I should have felt relieved. But my mother called the same afternoon, her voice tight with frustration. "You embarrassed us again, Amelia. The whole family is talking about how you turned this into some kind of investigation. Your father is disappointed. He thought you would do the right thing for once." The jab landed exactly where she wanted it. I reminded her that I had done nothing wrong and that the house was not up for discussion. She laughed once short and bitter. "You think this is over? We're just getting started. Family doesn't quit on each other, even when one member is being difficult." She hung up before I could respond, and the silence afterward felt heavier than any shouting. Evelyn and I met for coffee the next day to review the latest. She looked at the growing folder of evidence and said something that stuck with me. "You're building a wall they can't climb, but walls work both ways. Are you ready for what happens when they stop trying to get in?" I didn't have an answer yet. That night I sat alone on my back patio, listening to the desert wind, and realized the anger had settled into something quieter and more permanent. I was done explaining myself. I was done waiting for them to understand. But I still didn't know how far they would push or what I would have to give up to keep what was mine. The final push came in a single email from my Uncle James on behalf of the whole family. It was addressed to me and copied to everyone. He wrote that if I continued to refuse helping my older sister, they would have no choice but to distance themselves completely. No more holidays, no more calls, no more support of any kind. The message ended with a line that felt like a door slamming. "We love you, but we cannot enable your selfishness any longer." I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop and stared at the wall for a long time. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Something inside me had gone very still. I knew what I had to do next, but I also knew it would cost me the only family I had ever known. I forwarded the email to my lawyer Ryan Bennett right away. He called me back within the hour and said it was classic emotional blackmail, but not legally binding. Still reading those words from my Uncle James made the decision I had been circling for weeks feel inevitable. I sat at my kitchen table that night with a legal pad and a cup of tea, listing out every boundary I needed to set. No more calls, no more texts, no more showing up at my door. I drafted a simple message to the family group. "I've seen the email. I'm choosing to step back for my own well-being. Please respect my space and don't contact me further." My finger hovered over send for a long minute, but I pressed it anyway. The silence that followed was deafening at first, then strangely peaceful like the quiet after a storm finally passes. The next morning, my phone stayed quiet for the first time in weeks. No angry voicemails from my mother, no pleading texts from my older sister. Even my father, who had always been the quiet one in the background, didn't reach out. I went to work and focused on the stack of insurance claims waiting on my desk, but every hour without a notification felt like a small victory mixed with a deeper ache. Harper Morgan caught me staring at my screen during a break and asked if the quiet was a good thing. I told her it was necessary, but it didn't feel good yet. She nodded and said sometimes the hardest part is realizing family isn't always the people who share your blood. Her words lingered with me through the afternoon, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone, even if it felt that way. Evelyn stopped by after her shift with a bottle of wine and more questions about the investigator's report. We sat on my patio as the sun dipped behind the mountains and I showed her the email. She read it slowly, then set her glass down with a sharp clink. They're cutting you off like you're the problem. Classic reversal tactic. I agreed, but admitted it hurt more than I expected. She leaned forward, her eyes serious. You did the right thing, but now you have to live with the empty space where they used to be. Are you ready for that? I wasn't sure. We talked until the stars came out and she left, saying she would check in tomorrow. Her support was a steady thread, holding me together, but it couldn't fill the gap my family had left behind. A few days passed in that uneasy calm. Then my cousin Jackson messaged me privately, breaking the silence I had asked for. Aunt Karen says you're being dramatic. We all think you should apologize to your mother. The words twisted in my gut, but I didn't respond. I blocked his number instead, then went through and blocked the rest. My aunt, my uncle James, my older sister, her husband, even my parents. Each tap on the screen felt like severing a tie that had been fraying for years. My father had never stood up for me, always letting my mother lead the charge. My older sister had taken and taken without a second thought, and now they were gone from my life, at least digitally. The house felt bigger that night, the rooms echoing with a loneliness I hadn't anticipated. Work became my anchor in the weeks that followed. I threw myself into training for a new software system at the clinic, staying late to organize files, and even volunteering for extra shifts. Harper noticed the change and invited me to a team lunch where I met a few more colleagues who shared stories of their own family messes. One of them laughed about cutting off a toxic cousin and said it gets easier over time. I smiled and nodded, but inside I wondered if it ever really did. Evelyn kept her promise with weekly check-ins, sometimes over coffee, sometimes just a text to say she was thinking of me. She even connected me with a therapist. She knew someone who specialized in family estrangement. I made the appointment, but canceled twice before finally going. The sessions were hard, digging into old patterns I hadn't wanted to face, but they gave me words for the grief I was carrying. The holidays crept up faster than I expected. Thanksgiving came and went with me, eating takeout alone on my couch, scrolling through social media posts from distant friends. I saw a photo my cousin Jackson had posted, a big family dinner with my parents, smiling at the head of the table, my older sister and her husband laughing beside them. No mention of me, like I had never been part of it. The ache hit hard that night, sharp enough to bring tears I hadn't let fall in months. I called Evelyn instead of dwelling. She invited me over for leftovers the next day, and we spent the afternoon talking about anything but family. Her friendship was a quiet gift, but it couldn't replace the years of traditions I had lost. I drove home under the clear desert sky, feeling the weight of my choices settle deeper, a mix of freedom and isolation that tasted bittersweet. Christmas was quieter still. I decorated a small tree in my living room, hung lights on the patio, and baked cookies from an old recipe just for the smell of it. Noah Rivera from next door stopped by with a card and more tamales, saying his family always made extra. We chatted on the porch for a while, and he mentioned how peaceful the neighborhood felt this time of year. I agreed, but inside I wondered if peace was worth the price of being forgotten. Later that evening, I got an unexpected text from a number I didn't recognize. It was my father, using a friend's phone maybe. We miss you. Your mother says, Merry Christmas. The message stared back at me like a test. I read it twice, felt the pull of old habits, then deleted it without replying. Boundaries meant something only if I held them, even when it hurt. The new year brought small changes that built slowly. I started hiking the trails near my house on weekends, the red rocks and open sky reminding me why I had chosen Albuquerque in the first place. Evelyn joined me a few times, and we talked about her own life, her divorce years ago, how she had rebuilt without looking back. Her stories gave me hope, but they also highlighted how alone I still felt. At work, Harper introduced me to a book club, and I went to the first meeting, hesitant but curious. The group was small, welcoming, and for an hour I forgot about the empty spaces in my life. Noah invited me to a neighborhood barbecue in the spring, where I met more people who became casual acquaintances over time. These connections were fragile, nothing like the deep roots of family, but they were mine. Months turned into a year without any real contact from my parents or the others. I heard through Evelyn's network that my older sister had found an apartment downtown, paid for by my mother, no doubt. Uncle James had posted something vague on social media about family unity, but I didn't look closer. The investigator, Caleb Walsh, sent a final update: no more unusual transfers, at least none tied to me. Ryan Bennett closed my file with a note saying I was in the clear legally. Scarlett Hayes from Social Services never followed up. Even my coworker Harper's occasional check-ins shifted to lighter topics. Life moved forward in quiet steps, but the loneliness lingered like a shadow I couldn't quite shake. One evening in late summer, I sat on my patio watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The house I had fought so hard to keep felt like home, now every corner arranged just for me. But the victory, if it was one, came with a hollow center. I had preserved my space, my autonomy, but lost the people who had shaped me: my mother's demands, my father's silence, my older sister's entitlement. They had pushed me to this point, and I had chosen to walk away. There was no grand reconciliation, no moment of understanding, just me alone with the choices I had made. Evelyn texted to ask if I wanted company, and I said yes. As the stars emerged, I realized this new life was built on self-preservation, not triumph. It was enough, but it would always carry the echo of what I had given up. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been hard to share, but putting it out there helps me feel less isolated. If you've ever had to set boundaries with your family and ended up alone because of it, what kept you going? Share in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.